Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. If you like all things true crime, if you like it delivered in a peaceful, tranquil manner, if you like it clear and concise without drama, then I highly recommend you subscribe. And if you like what you hear, please smash the like button. It's a free way you can help. And now, without further ado, let's dig in. Hello, my true crime besties. I hope you guys are having a great day so far. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Madeline Soto case. And just a reminder, if you want to help me succeed here out on the harsh streets of YouTube, one way you can do that is by watching all of my videos, not just the ones on the cases that you are most interested in. I also offer $1.99 a month memberships. It's not a lot of money, and it goes a long way to help me. But enough of that, let's get started. Some parents say that they love their children so much that if one of them unalived another person, they would help them bury the body. Roberta and Chris Laundrie come to mind. Their son Brian is the person responsible for Gabby Petito's tragic death. In her infamous burn after reading letter to Brian, Roberta offered to bring her son a shovel and trash bags should he need to dump a body. Absolutely crap behavior for a parent who's supposed to teach her child right from wrong. In the case of Stephan Sterns, who is charged with both SAing and taking the life of 13-year-old Madeline Soto, back in late February of 2024, his parents, Chris and Debbie Sterns, are taking the opposite approach. They're actually cooperating with law enforcement. Despite their cooperation, they continue to receive hate mail and threats from those who blame them for what Stefan turned into as an adult. A man who habitually essayed Madeline Soto, often when she was sleeping, possibly knocked out by powerful anesthetics, and who went on to use his hands around Maddie's neck, allegedly. Stefan hasn't been tried and convicted of that crime yet. Now, after Stefan was arrested, Chris and Debbie Sterns were interviewed at length by the cops. I'm going to be sharing what they told them during an hour-and-a-half interview. One of the big questions the police had for Debbie and Chris was why they thought Stefan had traveled the 2.5 hours to Northport in the early morning hours, the day after Madeline was reported missing. That night, Stefan, Maddie's mother, Jen Soto, and Chris Sterns were spending the night in an Orlando hotel as investigators searched Jen's townhouse. Stefan had called his father earlier in the day, and he asked him to come to Orlando. Chris, who was in bed at the time he received the call, promptly got up, packed a bag, and drove to Orlando. It was after 3 a.m. when Chris arrived. Now, initially, I thought Stefan called his father to Orlando so that Chris could use his credit card to pay for Stephan and Jen's hotel room. But it turns out that Stephan and Jenn paid for their own room, although Chris did ante up additional money for Jenn so that she could stay with Stephan in an animal-friendly room with her dog Sailor. Chris Sterns told the cops that he doesn't know why Stephan wanted him to come to Orlando. One of his theories is that Stephan wanted him away from the family home in Northport when he drove there in those early morning hours. But this doesn't totally make sense because Debbie Sterns was still at home in Northport. You'd think if Stephan wanted free access to the family home for whatever reason, that he'd want his mom out of there as well. I think that Stephan wanted his dad with him for both emotional and financial support. And we know from Chris and Debbie that if Stephan had been at his parents' house in those early morning hours, he would have been unable to get inside. Debbie had some sort of lock on it that Stephan wouldn't have been able to get beyond. Nobody, except maybe the cops, know what Stephan was doing there at that time. I suspect he was dumping evidence. It turns out that despite Stephan being 38 years old, yes, 38, hard to believe, he was financially dependent on his parents. He had a job for a period with Disney, that paid about $30,000 a year, but he wasn't working there at the time of Maddie's death on Monday, February 26. Sounds like Stephan was being fully supported by the bank of mom and dad. The Sterns paid for his car insurance, his health insurance, his gas money, etc. In fact, Stephan was back living in his parents' Northport home in February of 2024. His visit to Jen Soto's townhouse was supposed to be a week-long stay. Jen was starting a new job, and she'd asked Stephan to come and help take care of Maddie for this first week. Stephan had actually moved back home to Northport in December, and this was at his parents' insistence when they decided to no longer pay Jen Soto's father, Juan, $600 a month so that Stephan could have his own bedroom in the townhome. When Stephan initially moved in with Jen, he would stay with her in her bedroom. This meant that he didn't have to pay rent. But when they sort of broke up, I guess, to some extent anyway, Stephan rented his own room. However, it was Chris and Debbie Sterns' dime that was paying for that room. After about 4 months, Chris decided that it would be better to have Stephan back in Northport. Both Chris and Debbie were worried about Jen's influence on Stephan. Debbie says that Jen smokes weed, lacks ambition, can't keep a job, and sleeps all the time. Yes, Debbie was eager to spill the tea on Jenn Soto. Debbie has also said that she wanted Stephan home because she was concerned about Jen allowing Maddie to sleep in the same bed with Stephan. Debbie even told Jen that Maddie was old enough now that this type of behavior needed to stop. The Sterns had known Maddie since she was 8 years old. Chris and Debbie told the detectives that when Stephan was living in their home, he kept his room an absolute pigsty. Can you imagine? He's 38, and mommy has to go in there to help him clean up his room. And after Stephan was arrested, Chris and Debbie promptly started cleaning that space. Debbie took pictures of the room supposedly before cleaning it, and she has said that the cops had already checked it out, but it does seem like they were eager to get in there and clean it up. As they described Stephan's behavior, the Sterns sound like they're talking about a teenager, not a 38-year-old. Stephan sounds exactly like my brother when my brother was in high school. My brother's room was sacrosanct. No one was allowed in except his girlfriend, and he pretty much never cleaned it. Apparently, when Stephan was home with mom and dad, he would spend all of his time in his bedroom. He'd only come out for meals. Let me guess, he probably didn't help clean up the plates and the dishes afterwards either. This is why the Sterns were unable to tell investigators whether or not Stephan was accessing child P from his home computer there. And when Jenn and Maddie would come over to visit Stephan in Northport, the three of them would spend most of their time in Stephan's bedroom, supposedly watching movies. But Debbie claims that she insisted that Maddie sleep in her bedroom, meaning in Debbie's bedroom. It sounds like Debbie and Chris maybe don't sleep in the same bedroom. So Debbie was like, I have this huge king-size bed all to myself. Maddie should sleep with me instead of being forced to sleep on the floor in Stephan's room. But of course, this might not be true. Maybe Debbie wants to paint a picture that nothing illegal went down in her and Chris's house. By the way, Stephan's bed in Jen's house was a single. Can you imagine how little space Maddie had to sleep in? I'd assumed the bed was at least a double, but no, it was a single. Maddie could not have avoided Stephan's body, even if she wanted to. The Sterns say they never noticed a change in Maddie's behavior over the years. They described her as a sweet, precocious girl who called their son Stephan Dad. But it also doesn't sound like Jenn and Maddie visited the Sterns very much. So perhaps they weren't really around Maddie enough to see or notice a change in her behavior. One thing that everyone seems to know about Maddie is that she got her period at age 11. Stephan himself said that Maddie was difficult when she suffered from PMS. Debbie Sterns says that once on a call with Stephan, she heard Maddie getting combative in the background with her mother. According to both Debbie and Stephan, Stephan played the role of peacekeeper in Jenn Soto's household. To me, this seems like another way that he ingratiated himself with Maddie and got her to be close to him and to trust him. Stephan has said that Maddie would come to him for comfort when she got into it with her mother. I can't help but think that Maddie was maybe suffering from Stockholm syndrome. He'd groomed her from such a young age that maybe she didn't even realize that what he was doing to her was wrong, that it was indeed SA. I think that if the Sterns are guilty of anything, it's enabling their son to live a life without adult responsibilities, allowing him to stay in their home on his own terms. They've said that he never did any of the chores they asked him to do. So what they had was a failure to launch son, a Peter Pan, someone who slept late, didn't clean his room, and who asked for gas money every time he wanted to go and visit Jenn and Maddie. The Sterns not enforcing tough love on Stephan may be down to a traumatic brain injury or TBI that Stephan suffered when he was 8, the same age at which Madeline was subjected to his SA. Stephan was apparently run over by a car. His parents were quick to bring up his TBI during their chat with the cops. That injury may explain why they continued to support Stephan well into his 30s. Perhaps they felt that the injury had done damage to his brain. Stephan and his parents say that he suffers from depression, ADHD, and anxiety. In fact, Stephan's been taking Adderall since he was a little boy. Adderall is an ADHD medication, and according to the website childmind.org, when a child has ADHD, their brain has an issue making and using a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine helps with attention and focus, and Adderall raises the level of dopamine in the brain to where it is for someone who doesn't have ADHD. People have also been known to take Adderall to lose weight. According to his parents, Stephan had also been seeing a psychiatrist for 4 years. So it sounds like Debbie and Chris had their hands full with Stephan, trying desperately to get him to grow up and become responsible. By the way, Stephan has one other sibling, a brother who is 11 years older, who went straight from high school into the Navy, and who wasn't very close to Stephan because of the age difference. According to the Sterns, the older brother is living a very good life, and he doesn't suffer from the same Peter Pan syndrome that Stephan does. When they were asked to describe Stephan as a child, the Sterns said that he loved animals. The family lived on a farm at that time, but even back then, Stephan refused to do his chores. In school, he played baseball and ran track. He also took karate lessons and achieved a brown belt. Debbie said that Stephan has a great mind for history. When asked about their son's emotions, the Sterns said he was volatile. Then they told a story about Stephan at age 3. Apparently the family flew to Florida, and on the plane there, they bribed Stephan with candy. And when they got to the hotel room, and Stephan found out that there was a mini fridge, he spent a long time trying to get the mini bar open. Debbie said he was after the candy inside, and eventually he did manage to get it open. Debbie has heard the show Gray Hughes did with a friend of Stephan's, and she was upset that this friend had described her as a mother who wasn't very nice to her son. Debbie said that she's loud, she has an Irish temper, and when she gets upset, she yells. However, she made it clear that she's never used her hands on Stephan, but she did admit that she yelled at him. Chris and Debbie went on to say that they got married after only knowing each other for 6 weeks. Per Debbie, they courted each other over the phone. How romantic. And then they got hitched. And when Debbie once hit Chris, he said that anything she does to him, he will do back to her. And that's when she stopped being physical with him. My impression of Chris and Debbie is that they have a solid understanding of one another and have been together for so long that they will remain together. Both express frustration with Stephan, but Debbie seems a tad more defensive about him. The Sterns then went back to describing Stephan as an adult. Although Stephan had a job at Disney with a salary of $30,000 a year, according to Chris, it wasn't enough for him to survive on. Part of the problem seems to be Stephan's proclivity for purchasing pricey items. Apparently, when Stephan inherited $7,000, he went straight out and blew it all on an Omega watch. The Sterns have also said that a Rolex, oh my, another story with a Rolex, that belonged to Debbie's father disappeared from their home. Both parents claim that Stephan has been stealing from them for a long time. Chris also said that packages for Stephan arrived at their house, and the packages contained pricey items, and he said he doesn't know where Stephan was getting the money for these items. This is concerning because I personally fear that Stephan was selling images of Maddie on the dark web, and I think that's how he was getting extra cash. According to the Sterns, Stephan only had a limited number of friends, including one guy named Frank. Debbie said that Stephan is very bright, has a very high IQ, and an excellent vocabulary. Both parents say that when Stephan gets an interest in something, he completely throws himself into it. And for a period, he got into whiskey. Later, it was tea. And we know that Stephan is interested in video games and in painting little figurines of certain characters. He also likes to collect cards associated with these games. The more I learn about Stephan, I feel like he would have gotten along great with Michael Jackson. As a child, Stephan apparently didn't gravitate toward other children. He was perfectly content to play by himself. And this was even before his TBI. By the way, the silver Lincoln that Stephan was driving on the day Maddie vanished, the same vehicle that he allegedly strapped her lifeless body into that morning, is what Chris and Debbie call their poodle ambulance. They use that car to drive their poodles to the vet. As a result of this, Chris warned the police that when they search that car, they will likely find, quote, puke, I hate that word, blood, and more items left behind by the poodles in the car. Gross. Per Chris, Stephan was driving the Lincoln because he didn't take proper care of his own car. And when Stephan told his dad that he was going to be headed to Kissimmee, to Jen's house, Chris was concerned about him driving that car. The car needed about $3,000 worth of maintenance, and Chris didn't want Stephan driving 2.5 hours in an unreliable car. So that's why Stephan was driving the silver Lincoln. It's upsetting to hear that 5 poodles were often in that vehicle. I'm thinking that this must have complicated the crime scene investigators' work processing the Lincoln. Can you imagine all the hair that they found in there? After Stephan was arrested, Chris texted Jen Soto to see if she had access yet to her home. Chris wanted to go over there and get Stephan's firearm. After that, Jen stopped responding to Chris's messages, and Chris felt that she was ghosting him. At that point, the cop told him, well, we've confiscated her phone, so that's probably why she's not responding to you. The cops then reassured the Sterns that they would get the firearm back. Debbie seemed concerned about that. It seems likely that the Sterns probably purchased that item for Stephan, and I'm wondering why they would have done that, knowing that he suffers from depression and anxiety. Deborah asked the detectives if Jen Soto had spoken to them about Sunday night after Madeline's birthday party. Deborah was referring to Sunday, February 25th. The detective asked her about what. Deborah was eager to spill the tea on this as well. She said that Jen had a headache that night, and that's why she told Maddie to go and sleep with Stephan. Now that's interesting because Jen has said that she just wanted to make sure that she got a good night's rest. She never mentioned a headache that I can remember. Is this an indication that Jenn was lying about the reason that Maddie went to sleep with Stephan? We all know that the truth never changes, so why did Jenn change the story about that detail? Could it be because it was planned that Maddie would go and sleep with Stephan that night? This is a very important detail in this case. Is Jenn afraid that telling the truth might implicate her in the crime? If I were the cops, I'd hammer her on that. Why did you send Maddie to sleep with Stephan? Deborah thought it odd, since Stephan was sleeping in a single bed there. Then Debbie recounted something Maddie had said to her one time during a visit. Maddie told Debbie that she was once sleeping with Jenn and Stephan, and she rolled over at some point during the night, and in her sleepy state, she put her leg over Stephan. Maddie then giggled when she said this. This is very interesting. Could this have been Maddie's childish way of trying to tell somebody about the essay? Maybe Debbie should have further queried Maddie about that. What Debbie did do is speak to Jenn and tell her that the sleeping together stuff with Stephan needed to change. Back to the days after Maddie's disappearance and before her body was found, Chris said that after the night in the Orlando hotel, Stephan appeared stoic and emotionless. Chris described him as being zombie-like. Stephan told the police that he was taking Ativan during this period to calm himself. When Chris heard that Stephan had secretly driven from the hotel to Northport, he was shocked. How could Stephan, who had appeared so sleepy and out of it, find the energy to drive 2.5 hours to Northport? Whatever led Stephan to make this drive had to have been really important. Chris said that after Stephan reappeared in Orlando, he went straight to bed and nothing could rouse him. Chris also let the police know that Stephan is right-handed. The Sterns told investigators that they hadn't seen Maddie since 2023, and they didn't know that she was taking any medication. But according to Debbie, Maddie was showing signs of being bipolar, which greatly upset Jenn, who apparently is bipolar. Both Chris and Debbie feel that Jenn knew what was going on with Stephan and Maddie. Chris said he was shocked by how calm and composed Jenn was after being told about all the photos of Maddie on Stephan's phone. Jenn didn't lash out at Chris. She didn't seem angry. In fact, at one point during her own interview with the cops, Jenn sent Chris a text telling him that Stephan needs a lawyer now. When Chris asked why, Jenn told him that Stephan, per the cops, had been SAing Maddie. Chris asked for how long. Jenn wrote back, 2 years. She also wrote, quote, "He needs to lawyer up." Chris found this so weird. It was like Jenn was protecting Stephan and taking his side over her daughter's. Per Chris, after this, Jenn acted normal. She wasn't mad, she wasn't screaming, she didn't explode in anger. She even came out for her interview and went to dinner with Chris. And apparently during this dinner, Jenn told Chris that Stephan was frustrated when it came to sex with her. Because of a medication Jenn was on, she had zero interest. Chris was surprised that Jenn was telling him all of this. To me, this feels like Jenn was maybe happy to send Maddie off into bed with Stephan, keep Stephan happy without her having to be involved, let her daughter take care of that. This is just me speculating. Chris also found Jenn's TV interview very disturbing. He pointed out the point at which we hear a bird in the background, and Jenn pauses and then smiles. How could Jenn be so unemotional when her daughter was missing? When the Sterns were asked if they thought Stephan was capable of doing what he's accused of, Deborah at first said no. To Deborah, what happened to Maddie had to have been an accident. She said that she had a dream in which she saw Stephan and Maddie together. Neither one of them had clothes on. Jenn comes in, sees what's going on, and a struggle ensues. In Debbie's dream, Maddie accidentally injures her head or breaks her neck. Debbie went on to say that she's had dreams before that turned out to be true. Debbie was very clearly trying to offload some of the blame for Maddie's death onto Jenn. She felt that Stefan's tears about Maddie were real, but she saw Jenn as not really being upset about Maddie's disappearance or her death. By the way, according to Debbie, Jenn did not allow Stephan to discipline Maddie. Now that's very interesting. Allow your daughter to sleep in the same bed with this guy, but not allow him to discipline her. How bizarre. It's like Jenn just put her hand in a hat and pulled out some rules for parenting. She throws out some, but she keeps others. She doesn't think the SA is evil, but she does think it's evil that Stephan did Maddie in, allegedly. But the Sterns did seem to concede that Stephan is likely the person responsible for doing Maddie in, but with Jenn's help, perhaps. Chris said he thinks maybe Jenn and Stephan made a pact in which Stephan has agreed to be the fall guy for Maddie's death, and he's doing this because of the guilt and remorse he feels for the years of SA. Both Chris and Debbie want Jenn arrested because they do believe she was complicit. Chris did ask Debbie at one point, "Do we really know our son?" It sounds like they knew he was troubled. They saw him refusing to grow up into a responsible adult. They saw that he had no ambition, no work ethic, but they didn't know how to fix him. It also sounds like they were worried that Stephan might end up accused of doing something to Maddie because of Jenn allowing him to sleep in the same bed with her. But they never knew that Stephan was capable of taking another person's life. The Sterns, like many of us, want Jenn Soto to face the music for whatever her role was in this tragedy, whether that was turning a blind eye to Stefan's essay of Maddie, or whether it was being more complicit in Maddie's death. Let's hope the full truth comes out and that all guilty parties are made to pay for this. Have you guys heard about Madeline's diary? A thread on Reddit shows photos of what are believed to be pages from Madeline's diary. One was not shared due to its explicit nature, allegedly depicting drawings of a girl being essayed by a man. Another entry, which appears to be written by Madeline, included a drawing of a sad girl with the lyrics to Lana Del Rey's song Summertime Sadness, and some of the photos on Reddit seem to include writing from Madeline's mother, Jenn, and one of them says, "My fluctuating moods, anxiety, and trauma-related symptoms affect my memory, concentration, focus, and energy levels." If Jenn was using Madeline's notebook or diary, this would suggest that she did know about the essay before Madeline's death. To me, a mother knowingly allowing this type of thing to go on is just as bad as what Stephan Sterns did. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Please hit that like button. It's a huge help to me, and I'll see you next time on Bed Crime Stories.